You've got that James Dean daydream. Well, I better not say any more lyrics so I don't get flagged. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Fervent 4. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Hello, I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I have my co-host, Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent 4 is a weekly show every Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business no matter the climate. Music is powerful. I would reckon we all want to listen to as much music as humanly possible. When we love a musician enough, we see them in concert. It's beautiful. There's just going to a concert is a wonderful thing. But can we use data and analysis to know what hit tunes will be mega stars, mega tunes? Dave Rosen heads up Secret Chord Laboratories. He's going to tell us all about that. But first, what is the musician who I was quoting from a song at the beginning of this show?
Yeah, I think if we look back, this is episode 69, Zach, I believe. And I think that it's probably the most popular artist in which you quote.
And we know Dave is like, I have no idea who it is. And I think it's great.
Zach loves his Tay-Tay.
Yeah. Nothing like a Taylor Swift to start. I figured, might as well use lyrics.
Scott would have known. My co-founder, Scott Miles, would have known that lyric.
Well, okay, random funny story. I probably shouldn't tell this, but I will. My sister was driving a car into my mom's garage and was blasting that so loud and jamming to it that she accidentally hit some of her like shelving units because she was jamming so hard to that song like 5 years ago. And it's just like, you just get into the music. Tay-Tay can do that to you occasionally, I guess. Dave, whatever you want to call it.
Dave is cool, yeah.
An E or an ID, whatever. Welcome to the show. How's it going, buddy?
It's going very well. Thanks for having me, Zach.
Yeah, good to see you, Dave.
Hi, Tim. Always good to see you.
How important is the mess behind you? That is your bookshelves, book CDs, the wall of Dave. How important is that in telling the story of you?
Well, I could probably just talk about the stuff that's behind me on the shelves the entire podcast. Oh, great. We're zooming in here. Okay, so I guess this all really started. The impetus is because I've been a musician for, I've been playing piano since I was 8 years old. Hence my MIDI controller, that side, which I write most of my songs on. Usually I have a bass to my left. That's in its case right now. It's actually behind me. This is my Strandberg bass. I've been gigging like a progressive rock bassist for the past 15 or 20 years. And that leads me to, this is a comic book and graphic novel that my band Chronicles of Sound made. Basically, the idea was to combine comic books and sci-fi storytelling with music. So we have an album and a couple EPs that are out. So that's what this is. I have an improvisational band that I was in for a while, purely improvisation. This is called the Space Cats. I used to wear this mask during our sets when we would play.
Wow.
This is a little yoga guy. So I do hot yoga, Bikram yoga. If I don't, I go a little crazy. It keeps me in balance with my, mind and body. I'm not going to go into any more. It's Phish tour right now.
I was going to say, so you're a Phish head, I see.
Improvisational music is at the core. My research before I met Scott Miles, the stuff I've done for my doctoral work, was about looking at the brains of improvising pianists and guitarists in jazz music and seeing what was happening in terms of their brain activity and patterns of their neural correlates associated with highly creative or kind of better performances compared to worse performances. So Phish was really my first love, Phish and the Grateful Dead, actually, into live rock or modal improvisation. I was always really big into rock, and so now Phish was always active. I have a group of buddies. We go to all the Phish shows. They're on tour right now, so I'm seeing a bunch of shows this summer, and excited to be back after about 2 years. During COVID not being.
Their favorite place to play allegedly is the spaceship, which is the Hampton Coliseum.
The mothership. I've been there. I've been there many times for Phish shows.
Why do they call it? Why? Because I mean, there's other stadiums that kind of look like that. The Madison, Wisconsin.
I think that's the acoustics within this space. They say are perfect for what they do.
It's like space. It's like the thing lights up. I know it looks like a saucer that's about to take off. And so I guess the idea is that, during like peak moments of the show, it feels like everyone's like lifted and in this like, container that's just like out in the universe. And you look from the outside, it seems like it could be this like spinning, mothership.
It is wild to drive by when they're in town.
Oh,
in
interesting.
The parking lot.
Well, I mean, I would think that's a selling point, that you have a facility that, a worldwide group talks about, but I feel like it's not something that many people want to talk about, I guess, because of the drugs. I don't know. Like you think that you would want to get behind something like that.
I will say, man, Phish food, ice cream is hands down the best ice cream in existence.
Oh, that's based off of them. I just put those two together. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I never realized that.
I think the backstory, each of them picked their favorite topping or mix in or whatever you want to call it into ice cream. And that's how Phish food was formed, I believe.
Oh, if we had Gavin, we would know.
So that's some of the background of the things. I guess there's more, but I ended up basically I had a daughter recently. And that caused, I'm in South Philadelphia, so that caused me to move my office from my second bedroom into my basement. And, shelving, the way you make space in South Philadelphia is to build up. So, shelves are key to optimizing space in a Philly row home.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at Tim's, for example, right, like his is metals. He runs all the time. He's got Tesla and Elon, big things that he are big fans of. Me, I'm just a fan of The Rock. And apparently I love winning awards and being egotistical about printing out articles of myself that have been there over the years. But it's cool to look at different backgrounds of people and see kind of what about them. Oh, and the Zach sign, Tim's daughter did that.
Nice.
Shout out. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to represent yourself in kind of that fun kind of way.
Yeah,
cool. That's the first time anyone's ever asked about any of the things sitting behind me.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there's a lot of first questions today.
Yeah. And I do have Kurt Cobain right there. Just as a
nice
little tribute to Kurt. And just, I mean, there's this music's a big thing with me, and that's what first drew me to you and what you have going on. Just music is, there's so much power within it. Can you describe to us, in your words, what Secret Chord does and what's the premise of it?
Sure. So what we do is we create a new type of data and insights about music that basically projects new music's future performance, and create all kinds of insights around those projections. We use that to empower creators and their teams. So it's musicians, artists, producers, engineers, DJs, to help them make music decisions, both on the creative and artistic side, and also in terms of business decisions. So to make that a little more clear, if I think about like a song's life cycle and all the decisions that have to be made from the moments of composition, creating the actual song, making new versions, writing the parts, right, deciding what a final song is, and then different mixes on that song, right? Even in that creation process, there's so many different decisions, and like each day, I know it's myself as a musician, when I sit down and I'm like working on a session, I could work on the same track for weeks or months. And a lot of the time I end a session and I'm not even sure if kind of what I did was a step in the right direction or not. And it takes, the feedback process is often very subjective. It's usually, there's never a consensus. And it's tough. It's lots of opinions. And so as a neuroscientist starting this kind of music data and music insights company, Scott and I met, my co-founder, we met back in grad school about 5 or 6 years ago to start the research that led to the company. And I was the most skeptical of this kind of ever working, because the idea of algorithms in a domain like creativity or music, people kind of say, oh, you can't use like an algorithm or just like understand like things about art and emotion that are so like intrinsic to the human spirit and are not just quantifiable like that. And that has been the case in lots of other kind of attempts to do something like this. But what we found in the research was that a key element to all of this is the surprise in music, and surprise across all these different components of music, from harmony and melody and rhythm and timbres and dynamics. And so, what we saw is that if surprise is part of the equation, my background is in music and music creativity, specifically in terms of my research background, and things that are creative and things that are innovative are often surprising, and they're unique and unusual, and that's inherent to the definition of creativity. And so by imbuing that into this data stream, I think it resonates more with artists and what they're trying to achieve than maybe past data has been able to, because it's pushing you to make a risk, take a risk, and to make like a new choice, and to push what you've done before to maybe a new level, to try something different. And I think so in all of that, offering that information in different ways to creators and users, and then beyond the creation process, as I mentioned, that's the life cycle of a song. You get into decisions like which songs make the album, and then you make decisions about which song do I feature as my #1 promotion track that maybe I'm going to spend $50 in Facebook ads, or like Google, or post that up and like make a music video and spend dollars on that. And like those and then marketing decisions too, of like, hey, we can give you feedback about what an audience in America will want to hear, but we could also say, what will an audience in France want to hear? Because the expectations and the music that, is doing well and popular over there is going to look different. And this is all about using past information mixed with, past data on songs, and mixing that with this calculation of the music of surprise, and combining it all together to make a more a prediction that more closely aligns to how people's brains respond to music, and how we elicit a dopamine response in the brain, rather than trying to give someone data that just kind of says, how close is your song to what was popular yesterday or 2 years ago, as so many kind of maybe other systems have previously tried to do.
I was listening to Hot Ones, which is a hot wing eating.
I love that show.
I don't know how to describe it. It's an interview session where most famous people go on this media tour, and what they do is typically they get asked the same 5 questions by just different hosts at different things. And Sean Evans created this thing with Complex, and I think the actual creator is Chris Schoenberger, and he asked famous people basically questions like you, Tim and I are asking you, but over hot wings, and the hot wings get hotter. He had Ed Sheeran on a few weeks ago, and one of the questions that he was asking, which was pretty interesting, it brought this up, was how do you select which song gets on? And he went into it, and so you guys can just Google Hot Ones Ed Sheeran, but he was basically like, what I thought was this actually was different than what so and so thought, the music group that was I guess his producer or something like that, and I thought that was interesting in the whole thing. So building that within knowing the international aspect, where people might want something different, is pretty interesting. You mentioned the surprise seemed to be the thing that was missing from previous analysis of a tool similar to this. It reminds me of, do you watch sports at all? Do you watch football?
Yeah, big sports fan.
Okay, so remember like when the BCS computers came around, and it was like this computer that's telling you like, here's how you're going to decide on the national championship game. It reminded me of something like that. So and a lot of people hated that because it was like, oh, you don't have the right people making this decision, you have a computer making this decision. So what have you done to make that surprise something that people should trust or should understand, where you're right, everything is such a creative aspect? And I'm even thinking, like, when you're talking about this, of like something like a Canva, which takes creative templates of designers and tries to take away that aspect out of it. Like it's so how is the surprise getting sprinkled into this, if that was the missing piece, if you will?
Sure.
Lot to unfold there. Sorry.
Well, and I think that and while we unpack that, though, I think that part of that surprise, though, is the artistical thing. So, like, is that why generally artists that sample certain things that resonates neurologically with the listener because there's that element of surprise that, oh man, they sampled in this and they sampled in that. I mean, is that part of the surprise that we're talking about?
Sure. So now there's okay. So a couple. I think
17 questions.
I think I can. Tim's point is really good. So I think it helps me kind of explain and dig into our main metric. So in our research, what we basically coined and established was this term familiar surprise, right? And what familiar surprise means and why we call it that is there's two memory systems in our brains. This is like dual system. This is, dual system theory. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, they won the Nobel Prize in terms of economics for decision making and economics for this. And it has to do with like how we process information. So we have two systems in our brain. We have a declarative memory system that it remembers conscious facts. It remembers events that have happened to us in the past. It remembers a sample from a song that I've heard before, as Tim just mentioned. That's system one. That's system two. System one is the unconscious system. It's our procedural memory. It's what's engaged when we're driving a car and also carrying on a conversation or changing the radio station, and we're doing it with automaticity, unconsciously. The surprise component of familiar surprise acts on system one, on this unconscious system. So actually the surprise is beneath the layer of consciousness. And so what Dopr does, Dopr's our software, our software is that it quantifies what was previously unquantifiable, which is basically saying we understand the music that has been exposed to a certain group of people in their environment based on, what kind of genres they like and how old they are and things like that, and can estimate this ideal or optimal level of surprise in the music for a bunch of different music features. It started in harmony. That's where Scott and my research began as doctoral students, where we looked at past music and looking at these patterns of surprise. Part of that, which really cool to unpack this a little bit for you, Zach, is that to kind of understand how surprise is happening is that it's not just something that's static. It mirrors how culture evolves. Music is part of culture. And over time, what we found was that just in terms of harmony, that we looked at Billboard charting songs in that research, both over about 60 years. So from 1958, from Johnny Be Good up through Old Town Road, 2019. And what we saw is that over these 25 year periods, you see more and more surprise being needed in the songs that kind of reach the top or reach the top quartile of Billboard charting songs is how we had defined it. And so these patterns of surprise can basically be modeled over time, and they're constantly evolving. And in order to have a certain amount of surprise, what that means is that you are doing something in a piece of music, an artist or a creator or the producers, whoever making those decisions. There's a certain amount of innovation and novelty that is required, and really helps a song compared to other songs raise its hand and say, this is the one that should get the most attention. And you see that in the Billboard charts, which is where the research started. But what's really cool about Secret Chord, I think the work that we're doing is it's all about going deeper for us. So the research started with Billboard charting artists, but what was great for us was last summer we did some pilot tests with like Universal Music, a bunch of other record labels and music distributors and publishers. And what we saw was that we scaled the research all the way up through the kind of the very recent past, where we were looking deeply at the past 3 to 5 years of music. And we saw that these same patterns of surprise that were, predicting success of the Billboard songs were also predicting overperformance of songs for, much smaller artists. And to us, that said, wow, this is this is not just a phenomenon and a neuroscientific principle of music enjoyment that's happening in just the most popular songs, but it's really kind of happening up and down the scale and across genres. You're muted, Tim.
Man. Yeah. So as you're talking about this, one of the things that, so tonight my wife and I are going to a concert, and I'll always cheat. I have to look at the set list before we go, just because I just like to know. I mean, I want to prepare for my mentally, make sure that I know all the songs that are going to be played, and it's just that's an enjoyable thing for me. But while we're doing that, I'll share the playlist with my wife before we go. But if there's a cover, I'll never share the covers that are going to be played because I want there to be that element of surprise. And to me, it just makes the show that much more enjoyable. When we hear that cover that's completely unexpected, and it's just fun.
I've never heard this. This is wild.
Well, I feel like, okay, so I'm going to step in for a second and say maybe, I don't know, I'd love to do this test, but the fact, Tim, that you know the covers that have been played at past shows and that your wife doesn't, that at the time when they play the song, my hypothesis would be that you would have more of a dopamine response because you have the familiarity, you have the explicit knowledge that it's coming. And like, we talk about that in terms of like going to there's like this, why is going to a concert also such like that experience? Like, of course, there's lots of people. It's like you're almost a single organism, like vibrating with this, like the music that's happening. That's like this physiological component of it all. But there's another component of it, like you bring your best friend to a concert and you know something about the show that's going to happen and you give them a little nudge and there's something that you love, right? It's like dopamine is a learning molecule. So there's like, you learn something. This is like fandom at its best. It's like, you know something. Cause like, Tim, this is a perfect example. You go to a show, maybe you're a big fan, maybe you're not, but the fact that you're taking the time to look at the set list and to like learn things about the band means like you're adding to the possibilities of enjoyment because like that context around the music is so important. And like, I'll talk about Phish because they're Phish that way because they're like my favorite band, but like you bring someone without the context, without knowing anything about what an improvisation even is, and like without that context or knowing here's a song, here's an improvisation, something as simple as that for someone who truly doesn't understand it, like people could walk away from that experience and say, oh, this is just a bunch of like whatever, like it was just like 20-minute songs and I didn't really get what was happening at all. But if you have a guide with you to take you on this adventure of like, this is from their story Gamehenge, which was the guitarist's thesis when he was an undergraduate at Vermont, and these characters and these songs are all related, and there's like all these levels of information beyond just the musical content too. That's like the whole idea with the comic book and the graphic novel. It's like it's really cool to unite story and things that you can like, you know, a narrative and like that extra level of meaning that you get from a book or a movie and like integrating that more completely with the music and having them like both add to the world that you were that was the idea of like making a world that people care about. And that's what great artists do, and great like creators. They make awesome personas, they make awesome videos, they release really cool apps like accompany their album and that like go with it. And having that extra content and extra knowledge, I think, is a key piece in terms of like really delivering a unique experience to your fans.
It sounds like this past year's Super Bowl with The Weeknd, where a lot of people were like, oh, I didn't like what he did as a performer. And it's like there was a huge story behind it, and he was telling a story the entire time that interweaved with a lot of his music videos and stuff like that. And so that's what I hear in there. What's interesting is, so if let's put this on with a commercial perspective. I'm watching just your standard TV. Are you saying with Tim's case, you say that since he knows what's going to come up, he's going to have a better time at tonight's show? Are you saying that if I knew what commercials were about to come up, I would be more likely to be excited about that commercial? What's the difference in that? Because they're kind of similar if you think about it. No, they're not similar.
No, they are. I mean,
okay, I see.
Well, I think that though, probably though, from a Super Bowl aspect, where we know which companies have bought into purchasing a commercial, there's that anticipation.
But don't you hate when you've seen the commercial beforehand already in the Super Bowl ad? You're just running it again.
I don't know. Always knowing. I definitely won't make the blanket statement that always knowing is going to be more enjoyable in terms of anything that you're consuming. A certain amount, I can't, because surprise is right. Surprise is key. But learning about something. So there's a key difference here in like, your free will and decision to learn about a topic as a human being and a musician or a creator. If you're someone who's like very into commercial production and understanding, like, to me, that process, part of the enjoyment that I personally get out of music is it's maybe a little different from others, is like the musical background. It makes my experience different, like understanding like composition and certain chords and elements of the music itself. It doesn't make it better, but the things that I appreciate in the music might be different, and actually maybe more of the time explicit knowledge that I'm saying like, oh, this is that chord that I know, or this is like this surprising, because I'm in this business. It's like, right. I think about everything in terms of surprise, while someone who's standing next to, like, my wife, who, well, she also hears about all this stuff all the time, so maybe thinks of it a little bit more than the usual person in terms of surprise, but she doesn't have like the training. She's just like has her tastes and like knows things that are like, this is a good groove, and like I love these vocals, or I'm feeling this emotion. And of course that's part of my equation too, but it's like it's different, and everyone's going to range on a scale of like how basically like is it just music content derived versus how much is it explicit knowledge, and there's no one formula as being like the best. It's just different in terms of it's just what contributes is different.
Let me ask you this, Dave. I mean, how much research, how much planning or discussion do you think went into picking Journey, Don't Stop Believing, as the last song of The Sopranos when The Sopranos ended? I mean, that just totally put Journey back on the map again, and it became like the theme song for a whole new generation. I mean, it's just, and everyone will always remember themselves watching that episode of The Sopranos.
Terrible show.
So I don't know. There's a wide range of how much is done in terms of like marketing and understanding a certain audience and demographics. If you range from TV shows to advertising, anywhere like music synchronization is happening, where you're selecting music, people generally have the demographics and understand who their key lists, who watchers and audience and customers are. And I think there's that data is definitely part of the process. Other companies we've come across have actually conducted neuromarketing studies. So they bring people into a laboratory and hook them up to like EEG devices and neural scanning devices, and like take heart rate readings and pupil dilation and all these different metrics to try to understand which songs they should select. This is like a very rare thing that happens, but it does. And so I don't know what HBO or how much they engage with their music production team does for any of those choices, but that's like the kind of, it's anywhere from gut, subjective, just like a decision by one person, up through really like doing brain studies on people if it's a big enough decision where they think enough dollars are on the line that it makes sense to do that kind of extensive work.
I just watched that show. I'd give it like a 7.7, probably 7.6. I said terrible show like just a second ago. Like, it's not terrible. I do think it's a little overrated. I did not remember that song whatsoever, Tim, even though I've watched that episode like 6 weeks ago, maybe. So it's interesting. Also, I mean, you never know, maybe Journey paid for it. There was something recently on like a Geico commercial where there's a band that had not been in the top 20 Billboard in 20 years, maybe. And because their song came out on a Geico commercial or some sort of insurance commercial, it was ants or something like that. Rat poison, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It became like a top 10 song because people would. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting how stuff goes through that. I think of it from a marketing perspective. I do a lot of marketing, and I think of the term sonic brand, where people don't even realize that the people are trying to get you to remember that jingle, trying to get you to remember that the audiogram of the Home Depot commercial that you're hearing, because that could be the thing that gets you to go buy from them. And so it's interesting how that aspect of it is intertwined in all of this, when most people, this is good marketing, don't recognize that thing was intertwined into it. So that's
when you think about how much now as everything is consolidating. I mean, Dave, you would know better than I in terms of like, there's only so many record labels that are out there right now. And now when you go out on the road, you have Live Nation. They're the big player in town in terms of who's going to be paying for tours and whatnot. So from a business decision in terms of, where you're going to spend your marketing dollars to ensure that you're going to get the biggest return on investment, what you're doing and with Dopr, I mean, it's a smart play in terms of why companies would be interested in what you're doing so they can make a smarter bet, I would think.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point, Tim. Like the marketing component and being able to really model by different demographics and geography, that was, as we have different data sources for in terms of like past streaming performance and such, and we use that to get a sense of like modeling what's been exposed to a different area or group of people. Eventually, really, what you'd want to get is individual level data that you could get like through a streaming platform, so you really could understand not just on a group level, such as like a country or a demographic, what people want, but you could really start to get it nailed down to a more individualized and personalized level. And that's cool. Not just, that's great in terms of advertising and things like that, but that's also really great in terms of, the next advancement in terms of music recommendation more broadly is really geared towards you, your expectations.
Because
good.
Right now, that's just based. So Apple or Spotify, that's just based on an algorithm that you thumb up or thumb down something. So if you thumb up something, it's just going to play more of this. And you're taking that one step deeper in the sense of they almost have a profile in terms of what you're going to respond to. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's more of a, you fall more into like a general character profile. And just like, I think the surprise isn't part of that, all of that. So, there's certain aspects of music that like, it makes sense you're going to like when you're listening to dance music, it has certain commonalities. But we see kind of surprise as a separate component. To go back a second, I thought there was a good point brought about Journey. And like music that makes a comeback, and like with the Fleetwood Mac example blowing up on TikTok. And so, it's a lot of things happening at once, right? There's like, it has to be like the right video, the right moment, the end of the right show. There's all these like pieces, and that's like, okay, that's built in here. But the selection for the music, what we see is like, there's a really kind of well-known study in our field in music cognition, by Carol Krumhansel, who was kind of like one of the founders of, music cognition, from Cornell. It's called cascading reminiscence bumps. And what this was is the idea that you have this reminiscence bump over about 25 years where the music or certain elements of the music that was popular 20 to 25 years ago makes a comeback. We often think of that as like retro, or we say like, hey, the 80s are back now, or the 70s. Yeah, the psychedelic, the hippie music came back, and then the 80s music with the synths. Now 90s, like Metallica, Nirvana are huge. I was on the beach like during the summer, and I heard a group of 18-year-olds. They were talking about how like no one loved Metallica more in the world than they did. And like the kid was like 18 years old, and I'm like, oh man, like yeah, okay, great. You think that, but like this is the second time around. Like there are people who grew up with Metallica who went to like all those shows and have been with them forever. And I think that just like shows this phenomenon, and it makes sense in a way. It's like, okay, it's like the music from that time in a way that becomes familiar to a generation by being played played in the house by parents and having that early exposure, and like you start to combine like these musicians have also been.
It's not just music though. I mean, it shows too. I mean, Google did that with Home Alone through some of their ads in the last year.
Exactly. It's not just music.
It's interesting, and so it has to be all of these features, if you will, all these elements have to hit at the same point. I mean, I was shocked to kind of consume some of the research on Lil Nas X about 18 months ago that he basically made it big because of TikTok. And I'm not certain that there is anyone who's done it as big since. I mean, maybe The Weeknd in that dance, but like he was already someone. For someone to go from nothing to someone as big as what's the song called? Old Town Road.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty interesting that he was able to do that, become such a sensation because of a platform like that. I mean, but in 25 years, that song will come back and it'll do exactly what you're saying. And it'll be interesting to see Billy Ray Cyrus, like 95 years old, cruising down the street in his Maserati or whatever, I guess. But
and the reason, so there's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack there.
There is, but that's what's interesting in it, because people think that there's like this, I don't know, secret formula, and maybe there is, but there is a luck aspect in that too, I think. right?
I think so too. But there's a probability. So I'll unpack that a little bit. So there's a probability of things happening. So the fact that things are blowing up on TikTok is a phenomenon of like TikTok, growing and just like having more and more users than ever, and having it be a method that like their algorithm is better in terms of like finding you video content and short snippets of things that are really going to resonate with you. It's not like Lil Nas X didn't become big because of TikTok. Lil Nas X became big on TikTok, which is a very different thing. And it's a question that I get asked all the time, and then like an interesting use case is to say, how will this song perform on TikTok, or what's going to be the next kind of breakthrough thing on TikTok? It's really, people are asking, this is where it's happening, so I'm laser focused on this platform. If I were to take Lil Nas X,
are you saying the platform, the musician, the performer doesn't matter? They will figure out the.
Well, they have to be
stage.
of course, they have to be on the stage and understand how to generate that content. But I could read a blog and tell you how to make a good TikTok video in a minute. But what's not told in that video is what content will be in there that will be enjoyed the most. So Lil Nas X is like, first of all, a very interesting cultural figure for this moment in time.
Sure.
Just everything that's happening socially in terms of like, gender fluidity and boundaries, and like, is this, and the fact of where he came from is also like, this is a true story of like this underdog rising. So that's like this explicit knowledge of something culturally that's happening. That's the familiarity, right? And to me, the surprise was at that point in time was taking hip hop and rap music and combining it with country music, like almost in a way that hadn't been done before, with like drum samples and triple beats,
and slightly
like
frowned upon in many situations. I mean, he was at many country live shows I've seen, and like people are just like not into it at all. Like, and then vice versa, when the country aspect of it goes onto a rap show, like people are like, what is this? Like, it's interesting to see that. Yeah.
Right. But it's highly, in terms of, if you're now to think about the modeling that we do at Secret Chord and Dopr, if you think about, so genre is a key aspect of how we in these early days are making these models. So songs can belong to many genres, and when you look at past examples of songs in those genres and create your ideal ideal levels of surprise, and then all of a sudden you have songs that clearly break those rules and show that for a country song, this rhythm and these timbres are very surprising, and for a hip hop song, this like acoustic guitar, right, is really like kind of out of nowhere and out of place. And that's like a moment of surprise and like of innovation that I think it's a great example. And then what you have is a lot of people trying to copycat this thing that was big, right? And this is generally the response. And this is like, you have people trying to make a country hip hop song, and maybe, that fizzles after a while because of all this copycat, and like maybe Old Town Road like is only the coolest song, whatever, for, a year, right? But as you're saying, like maybe that song comes back in 20, 25 years, all those copycats are forgotten, right? And then the cream of the crop across eras remains a part of our culture. And like that's why the Beatles are still having influence today, and that's why that's why there's rock bands today who sound almost exactly like Led Zeppelin, and they're like, wow, like, because the cream of the crop over. This is why R&B bass lines from James Jamerson, from Stevie Wonder songs, why James Brown, like Prince, like all these. Oh, you can go through the decades and name the artists where like the cream of the crop had a constant influence, have a continuous evolving influence on culture, where people take, because as a creator, you're inspired by that music. When I was a kid growing up, you have, just because you're an artist and you have music that you love too, and like you're constantly taking that in, and I think stealing is the wrong word, but you are like inspired by certain elements of that music and try to consciously incorporate it into your writing process, like a sound that you heard or a feel from a song, and combine that with your other tools. And like it's almost like the creator and the listeners are going through this like process together and learning about these expectations from the music they hear about what sounds go together, except one person is taking that and kind of combining it very consciously into their creative process. Maybe some of it's unconscious too, but like, you know, and are diligently working on making a sound that is theirs, that like makes sense off of like the music that they love. And the same thing is happening for the listener, except they're not creating it. They're kind of setting up and deciding their like, you know, structure of what it is about music that gets them off and that they really love. And they're looking for music that they can say, you know, this is like this. I love this music. In it could even be as simple as like when I'm ready to party. Here's the songs that I put on my party playlist that I know are going to deliver this. Or like, this is an amazing song when I'm like trying to have a romantic dinner with my wife, and I'm going to like bin them, or husband. I'm going to bin them here, and like that's just like what we would use, and like what we can pull from. Is just like this cool process of like over time that we're constantly feeding off of each other as creators and listeners. And now more than ever, especially with like computers and things like GarageBand, some recent metrics that came out from the music industry about like how this like creator and listener relationship is really like transforming into there being more creators than ever, because I can open up some software and make songs on my computer like more easily. There's more interest in being you know, someone who is making the music, who's also consuming the music. And it's like not as much of a stark distinction as the days when, you know, when you had to like, go to the store to buy a CD, and it was like really hard to find a music lesson or to learn how to like, you know, now I can just go on YouTube. I say, hey, can I like learn basic music theory? And I could probably watch some videos in like a week and be able to sit down at like a piano and start to like play some chords for songs and like sing on top of them and record them. And that technology has really facilitated that process. I've been an educator for like way before I was an entrepreneur. And that was where a lot of my work focused in my lab at Drexel University was on STEAM education. And so that is really STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. And the A is the arts. So merging those together and learning about like, so I used to teach about like the physical properties of sound and like the different, what does it look like for a piano to play a middle C in terms of like the frequency response versus a violin playing a middle C. Why do those things sound different even though they're the same note? And talking about like basic acoustic properties all the way up through how do you produce music and record vocals like in a studio. And so through this, like making art a part of like the STEM curriculum, you not only give students, a lot of the times we worked in Philadelphia, so a lot of underprivileged school districts and students, the opportunity to just like dive into a music project that they might never have otherwise been exposed to. But at the same time, they can develop their creative selves as well as like these core skills to just general success and knowledge in a more broad way. So
as you're doing all of this and you've had to go out and raise money, I'm curious about this journey as you're talking to investors. You know, so do you have to find a specific investor that understands this stuff, or you know, how has that process gone? I mean, it's because everyone talks about, man, raising money is so difficult, and you know, this is an interesting journey for you because you're making a new category, and you really don't have you can't say that you're like the Uber of this or the Airbnb of that. I mean, you're creating something new. Talk about that process.
Sure. The best. So just to go off of what you said about the Uber of this or the Airbnb of that, the closest that we've gotten to that kind of statement is kind of like we're the Rotten Tomatoes of music.
Wow.
That's just the Dopr. That would be just the Dopr score aspect. I think that's an oversimplification, but if I had to like get to something like that, anyway. But in terms of like the journey, you're absolutely right. It's difficult, and there's nothing like this. So like I was a cognitive neuroscientist in music cognition, and usually the question people ask you when you study that is, what are you going to do with a PhD in music cognition, psychology, and neuroscience? And my answer was always, I don't really know, but I know I'm going to be better off with that degree than not, and I'll figure it out. And so before joining Secret Chord, you know, I taught psychology at Stockton University as a visiting assistant professor for a year. And the general path was like, okay, continue with research, continue teaching. I'm a musician also, so keep on with that. It was only a 1-year gig, and after that, I was accepted to go to Wesleyan University as another teaching professor, and also to Max Planck Institute in Germany. And I was trying to like basically decide between these two paths of like doing more research in Germany or teaching more. At that time, Scott Miles, my co-founder who I'd done this research with, he informed me that we were accepted to Project Music, this Google for Startups music tech accelerator, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We spoke about kind of before we were on here live. And kind of, I was like, okay, I'll see what this is all about. I think there's something here. And I think it'd be really cool if we made a business and a place for people who study music cognition and music technology, where like the only places you could go right now, for the music tech side, you can go to Pandora and you can go to Spotify, and there are like music tech companies, but there's nowhere that's really like human centered that brings together neuroscience and machine listening and artificial intelligence and music theory in this like kind of comprehensive way. And I guess it goes back to, it's kind of like the graphic novel too. It's like I've always, and my lab advisor at Drexel, he was from MIT Media Lab, and they had the same approach where, and Drexel University's Excite Center basically was built when I started grad school. And it was built off this philosophy that when you bring experts from a lot of different domains together, you start to tackle the most interesting questions. And that's where real innovation happens. And so like, if you take the landscape of music data and music analytics, it's not very human centered. It's very algorithmic centered, which, algorithms do a great job of learning from data and doing some kinds of predictions or generating what is likely to happen, but it can't get you that extra step. And so to answer your question, Tim, about investors, I've spent a lot of time refining the pitch deck and the materials of the company and how we speak about the company, because we don't think that it needs to be and it hasn't been people who only invest, actually almost no music tech investment from like your standard music tech companies has been where the funding has come from. It's been from people who have heard this idea articulated on shows like yours, on like Inquiring Minds podcast, on Mindscapes podcasts, in Ars Technica and Psychology Today, and all these different media outlets that have like picked up kind of what we're doing. And they say, listen, if this thing, we're early stage. And so I would say the biggest hurdle in my fundraising has not been because of lack of concept or lack of idea. It's because of lack of actual product being in the market. And so I think the biggest leap, and these are conversations, we have a couple of lead investors that we're always kind of thinking about what are the next, we talk with them and with our team. It's an ongoing conversation with our advisors too. We have a great team of advisors from Universal, Suheen Roy, who was over there, to people who are working at Big Machine Label Group, to product advisors who've worked at Google and Amazon Music, and like all over the place, and like getting that feedback and always learning about like, okay, your early stage, what does that mean in terms of your next milestone, and like what do we need to deliver in terms of product developments that are going to keep people like feeling this is like hitting its marks. And so something we've been doing internally that I think has been really key is back to the spring of this year is we started making forward-looking forecasts of new music that came out on Friday. And we've kept this kind of, very internal. We've only shared it with our investors and our advisors, and we keep doing these forecasts. And every time we do a forecast, there's been a key model improvement, and we've seen accuracy go up. So we make these 3-month streaming projections of songs. So we say basically a song will likely get within this range of streams. It has an upside, which means basically a less than 10% chance of crossing a certain threshold. And then basically we track these metrics because we've established it looking backwards in time. And testing is one thing that like, people criticize back testing and say, okay, like in the financial world, especially, we've had conversations about, just because you've back tested something in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. Markets change all the time is like a criticism I've heard from some key investors. And my response to that is that's true. In financial markets, they're susceptible to all kinds of things happening, and it's not copying what's happened before. And I guess the feedback that I would say is what we're doing is different than a financial market is we are modeling a neuroscientific principle of music enjoyment and using that as a data source. And the brains of humans, right? The music is changing, but the brains aren't. And so to say that differently is like the memory systems that I outlined in the beginning of the podcast. We're not developing a third memory system that I know of. There's two memory systems, and while the music is always changing, if we are to understand these patterns of surprise, not just today but over time, then you can rely on the fact that there's this data point that's based on actual brain studies and studies of music and analysis that are going to basically work moving forward, because they've been true for 60 plus years of popular music. And in these tests that we've been looking at, it's been very informative, not only to see if the models are getting better, but really to see where the model sucks. Like, what genres is it not performing well on, and why might that be? Or like, what new feature might need to be included because this level of artists were like, we're missing, we don't have as high of accuracy on a different level of artists. And as we continue to build that, so I'd say the biggest roadblock has been just, and on the product side, it's like we've been in stealth mode, getting that initial product out the door. We're launching this fall to a very closed beta round, small, about 100 artists who are going to be using the platform. And so that's like where we are with everything right now. It's like getting the final model together that we're ready to really get out there. The platform is looking great, and just like, getting to a key point where we have enough users, we have the right partnerships in place where, I think next spring or so, we're going to be looking to raise a much bigger seed round.
And at this fall, when you do the limited release, is that set up in a way that an artist can record something, upload it to your platform, and then it does the analysis and then provides feedback back to the artist?
Yeah, so exactly. So basically, an artist just comes onto the page. It's through invite only, but you can join our wait list at Dopr.com. And so you can join the wait list, and you upload music. You link to your artist account. You sign up, link your email. You say link to my band's name right now is Nakama. So I can link to Nakama, pulls it up, says, okay, we will automatically analyze like 30 of your released songs that have previously been posted for you as the artist. And then you can upload new music that's been unreleased. So I could upload, let's say, a new song that I'm thinking about releasing. I could upload 5 versions of the same song that I like are slightly different, and I want to get some insights maybe over which version is the best. I could upload a couple versions of different mixes of songs because, maybe I decided to boost like the bass or the low end on one mix, and I want to see if that's going to help my Dopr score or streaming projections. So all kinds of different, ways to use that. Yeah, it's basically just uploaded, and then you're in our platform, and you can see basically all your stats for your entire library, which is your released and unreleased tracks combined. You can see your stats for just your released and unreleased tracks, and then you can go deep into like a song level analysis. So that's like the closed beta is just like kind of like very much focused on the platform, getting feedback from users. What do I like? What do I not? What don't I like about this? Making those tweaks. As we scale this next year, 100 users, very closed. We'll probably start even with like 25. And that's scheduled to start at the end of September with our like first. We have like Rob Abelo is our third co-founder. I mentioned Scott Miles, my research co-founder. Rob Abelo is our third co-founder, and he is the music industry guru. Him and I go back to first grade. We've known each other for 30 years. We've stayed in touch all that time. We lived together for a few years in Philadelphia, and he moved out to LA 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, to start a record label and management company called Roll Call Records. He moved back to the area about 6 months ago, which has been awesome. So his family's from here. But anyway, he joined the team, and he took our research and kind of this data that we were able to generate and said, I'm working with independent creators every day. I'm getting like, I'm a small record label in LA. I'm getting like hundreds and hundreds of emails from different creators who like just want like any, not even to be signed, but like they want any kind of feedback about like, is this good? Is this the direction? What could I be doing better? And like that demand, as he really educated the team, I think more than anyone, about this rise of like, and it's happening all over the world in like the creator economy, right? And the rise of the middle class of musicians and independent artists. I think earlier in the podcast, maybe it said like, I think we were talking about how a lot of the larger labels have consolidated. They consolidated a number of other labels within kind of the umbrella of, let's say, a Universal or a Sony. Well, there's also outside of those major labels, there are thousands of independent record labels around the world who are not associated with them. And there's a ton of, and there's like even more creators. There's like 25 million creators on SoundCloud. There's projected to be 50 million creators on Spotify by the year 2025. And like the data that we're pumping into the platform and types of features that we're developing are trying to really hit the needs of all those creators out there who are trying to like fight against the stiff competition and like the demands of the music industry to not just be a creative and not just to be artistic, but to actually have the business savvy in terms of like marketing and putting together a budget. And like generally the average musician, the average creator who's passionate as hell about their music and is working every day so deeply on making the best song, the reality is most of those people don't have the tools, resources to like push that music out into the world in a way that's even going to touch an audience. Like, and I think that's what's important here is really delivering something, the data in a way that can help with those decisions along the journey.
Well, the thing that's interesting in the mindset of an angel investor is very different, because angel investors, they need to think about, will this work? They really need to think about what if this works, or what will it look like when this works. So it'll be really interesting as I'm listening to you talk about this. You now have Dopr scores and you have independent artists that are trying, they're just trying for their chance. You know, do you see there be a day, or do you hope that the day will then arrive where someone can say, hey, we've got a Dopr score of X, you know, we're now going to enter this NFT market where bands can then start raising money, you know, from a NFT standpoint in order for them to get to where they need to go to fund the album, fund the tour, or that kind of thing. I mean, that to me, that's where it would be really, really cool to see that in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, you nail it, Tim. Like to me, deciding what song or what content is going to be in an NFT, or that's one of many. It's just a decision about the music, right? It's a content selection decision, and that was one of the things when we did our pilots with Universal. Now our advisor, who was then the former senior vice president of innovation, Tuhin Roy over at Universal, what he mentioned was like, it's about seeing what this could be. And he's like, I go through thousands of songs and thousands of artists here, and like who we're going to sign and what songs we're going to push. And like, I could imagine this just being like a Dopr score, like a staple on a white sheet or a one sheet about a song. And it's just like, okay, like pop indie 86 Dopr score, like, and comparing it in that way. And like Dopr charts is something that, you know, we talked about, is like the idea of, you know, having Dopr be maybe not just a place of, you know, for feedback and music decisions for the creators and their team, but maybe that information one day is also valuable to people who are making decisions around, like, you know, artist discovery and song selection and A&R decisions. While that's not
our tomato aspect of it, I mean, is what I'm hearing, you know, and there's that score there. You mentioned other musicians and how, you know, they're just producing and not really thinking about any of the business aspects of it. I mean, it sounds like in some capacities, that's what about what you guys have been doing is just building and building and building. How do you guys make business decisions, since this is a business?
How do we make business decisions? So
I mean, everything else is so analytical. You look at this chart and it's there, and with this, it's like, oh, you have to.
We speak. I mean,
you have to figure out what to do.
Right. Well, it's not right. It's not just our input. Like, we're speaking with tons of musicians, tons of producers. We have a pretty extensive network. We've been a part of 2 music tech accelerators: Google for Startups, the Project Music, and also Walifornia out of Belgium. Rob's network has been awesome, like bringing in and having conversations with all types of musicians, creators, but also artist managers, record labels. And there's been a ton of work done in terms of like customer discovery and like business development, in terms of like strategy of, you know, who is the right target market for this. Back in the day, like a year and a half ago, I'd say, you know, initially we were focused like as more of a B2B kind of enterprise, you know, tool. And like kind of as we were building it and started adding features and things, what we like kind of were seeing was hey, like actually, and like really learning about the industry and like the economics of the trends and what's happening there. It's like we're just trying to take it in, and we're trying to get a pulse for where things are going and what the needs are for the market that's out there, and then what that market looks like, right? And like, what are we? Another part of it is like, what can we do the most uniquely than anyone else in the world? And so a part of that also decision with like creators and their teams is like the type of analysis we do by different features of music. So when I say harmony, melody, rhythm, dynamics, and timbre, part of those pilots we were conducting with Universal and others was that it's not just a number like a Dopr score and a streaming projection. That's like the beta is kind of focusing on that. But what underlies that information are very specific data at a song level about those different features and their amount of surprise. So to make that a little more clear is that we generated, let's say you have like an audio file from left to right, like you would on like a SoundCloud where you can see kind of the waveform. And across that audio file, we have an ideal like window of surprise and what that looks like. And what we can do is we can chart over time where your song is hitting or missing in terms of being within this like kind of ideal range given your target audience, target sound space and such. And so to me, there were a bunch of indicators and kind of input from the industry, things that were happening, from advisors on our team, from Rob's experience, from, you know, like in the industry, and like just really going through the process of designing, testing, building the model, trying things to make like the accuracy metrics on that improve. And I think the real test that we're looking forward to now is putting all of that information together into a product that's basically ready to go out the door and say, now what needs to be different? What are like the best things? What are the worst things? What features do you need to see to make this useful? Like we have a laundry list of next feature add-ons for like, as we open up the beta more widely. But we, like you're saying, Zach, it's like we can be very theoretical and and like make our decisions based on all the information we can take in. But you're really not going to know how people are finding value and how they're using, both from analytics and from their own just qualitative reports, what's working and what's not, and what the next kind of move is.
Well, stay tuned, I guess, is the answer, right? I mean,
stay tuned.
Yeah, super excited about the possibilities in your future ahead.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. Anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about as we wrap up? Favorite musician? Sure. I mean, we know that's Phish.
Phish is my favorite. Phish is my favorite band. Anything we haven't talked about? No, not too much. But I guess I just leave to say, we're creators, and creativity and flow states of music performance, like that kind of creative state that we enter when we're having kind of this like peak experience of creativity and things are flowing. To me, that's with music and kind of experiencing that flow as a creator or that flow as a listener is to me like that's what speaks about music. That's what speaks to music. And when people get all excited and tingly about their favorite song or at that moment in the concert, it's really about finding that. And I guess to me, I'm trying to create a tool where you go through the creative process and it's part of your experience. And like I've seen technology just further music creation and give more accessibility to music creators around the world of all ages, which is awesome. And now I think what we've been able to find with research and with surprise and understanding these features and all of this within music is trying to find a data source that can help creators like make sense of feedback from lots of people and like kind of balance gut instinct with data, and then ultimately going back to your gut to make a final decision as to what that is, right? Like an algorithm like ours and a model like ours, it's all based on probabilities. So, just because something gets a 90 Dopr score every time, it's not going to necessarily be the top track, but more so than often, it will be. And so if we can provide signal within all of the like noise and competition out there in the world, that I think this is the methodology and the approach to get there. And so, definitely stay tuned, and Dopr.com will be up and running soon.
That's awesome.
And I think stay tuned to figure out if your assumption on Tim being excited during these bonus songs tonight, if you will, the cover songs tonight at the concert. It'll be interesting to see who is more exciting. We'll find that out. Stay tuned next week.
It might also depend on the song. Like maybe if Tim likes the song.
Do you know what the songs are now, Tim?
More than
you looked at?
Yeah.
Are you going to be excited about them? Are they good?
Well, no, yeah, I'm excited about them, and it's it's.
So your wife does your wife know that you withhold the cover information?
Yeah.
Oh, she does.
Yeah,
okay.
but based on what I've learned today, it's like, gosh, maybe I should share so that she'll enjoy it more. I don't know.
So they openly release set lists now? See, I've never thought to do that.
So the website's called setlist.fm, and it's a wiki essentially where people that go to the show they upload the set list.
From the day before or something?
Artists.
From the day before?
Yeah.
Phish set lists, like we're tracking the show live and it's going up like song by song on Twitter and on like all these Phish.net and all these sites. Like literally the second a song starts, it's like I have the song and like the length of the song like at my fingertips because fans are crazy. Like fans with a PH are crazy like that.
Crazy.
Well, stay tuned all around. Dave, it's been awesome chatting with you, and
thanks for having me.
We'll see y'all soon.
Awesome
Peace.
conversation, guys. Later.